Welcome to the West Ham Voice. Good morning to you. It's Friday. Hey, the weekend's almost here, and we've got Chelsea to look forward to, who won last night, who beat Spurs 2-0 and have gone above us in the league. So we're now ninth in the table. European qualification looks even further away. And of course, we play Chelsea this coming weekend on Sunday. So a win will help us go above them, but a defeat will see us stay in ninth place and quite possibly other teams below us catching us up, and we may drop even further. But anyway, this show is not about where we are in the league, but it is all about the latest news that have come out of West Ham. It's never a dull moment with West Ham United, is it really? The latest story that has been released is all about two senior people at West Ham United having fallen out. And of course, those two people are the manager, David Moyes, and the technical director, Tim Steidten. Now, let's get one thing right. David Moyes does not have the capacity to ban Tim Steidten from the dressing room or the training ground. It's not in his capacity to be able to do that. Tim Steidten doesn't report to David Moyes. So David Moyes has got no right over him to tell him that he's not allowed to come to the dressing room or the training ground. Furthermore, my understanding is West Ham United as a club has not banned Tim Steidten from doing that either. It's not a decision made by the club, and it's not a decision made by David Moyes. In fact, there is no ban, to be quite honest with you. It's all about, really, Tim Steidten deciding to actually stay away from David Moyes and, unfortunately, the squad in order to allow no further distractions between now and the end of the season. Look, you believe what you want to believe. I don't even know if that's true. I do know that it's not David Moyes that has banned Tim Steidten. That's impossible to do. Would West Ham United as a club ban him from going to the dressing room and the training ground? I don't think so either. I think that's quite far-fetched. But do I believe that maybe there's a conversation had and Steidten has decided that it's best for all at this moment in time to keep his distance? Yeah, I believe that. That sounds far more plausible than any ban happening. But look, there was an awful lot of talk at the beginning of last season when Tim Steidten signed for West Ham United that both these men were at loggerheads. But there was nothing really that we could pin that on. There's an awful lot of speculation. There was an awful lot of talk, but that seemed to be as far as it went. And then, of course, we had a really, really good summer transfer window where it seemed both men were working well together. David Moyes seemed to be taking the proposed signings that Steidten seemed to be taking the signings that Steidten was proposing, and he seemed to be happy with them, like Alvarez and Kudus, etc. And it looked as if maybe, whatever the rumours were beforehand, the two men were working well together and everything seemed rather rosy. Perhaps back then, maybe it was just an uneasy truce that the two men had been working towards. But it was evident that Steidten hadn't come to West Ham United just to be a glorified scout for players. There was a project that he kept alluding to, that he kept talking about, a long-term project, which is why he was attracted to West Ham United in the first place. And many of us wondered whether David Moyes was going to be part of that project. And we all more or less said, well, no, clearly he wouldn't be. But then there was a massive spanner in the works last season, wasn't there? Because David Moyes won a trophy. My thinking is this now, given what's happened recently about there being a fallout between the two men, my feeling now is this. I think there was a strong likelihood that David Moyes was going to be replaced last summer. But he scuppered it all by actually winning the Europa Conference League. And then, of course, the board would be looking at that and going, hang on a minute. First manager who's won us a trophy for over 40 years, etc. It clearly wouldn't look right if we now decided to let him go. So I think that project was kind of put on hold the Steidten project was probably put on hold for this season because West Ham United would have, or Sullivan would have said to Steidten, look, mate, I can't sack the manager. He's just won a major trophy. Let's just see how the next season pans out. So I think maybe the project has been delayed by a year. But the relationship between Steidten and Sullivan has developed, mainly because Sullivan was over the moon with Tim Steidten and his interaction in the transfer window by getting the likes of Kudus, Alvarez, etc., over the line. He was cock a hoop, and that brought those two men closer together. So then, if that's the case, then that begs the question, why was there a new contract offer made to David Moyes that we first heard about at the end of December, at the end of last year? Well, let's not forget where we were as a club at that point in time. We were doing exceptionally well in the league. We were doing exceptionally well in Europe. We just qualified again through the group stages, straight into the knockout, the playoff stages. The knockout stages. We didn't have to work our way through the playoffs. And everything looked quite good. So it doesn't surprise me that West Ham United might have been considering a new contract for the manager at that point. It looked like he was getting on well with Tim Steidten. He was doing well with the club, both in league and in Europe. What's there not to like? So I kind of get why a contract offer may have been made. But then the first signs of unrest came in the January transfer window. We didn't hear much from Steidten at that time. The private jet was locked away in the aircraft hangar, in the aircraft carrier, and we ended up with a repeat of what had happened in the last two winter transfer windows, where the squad was not strengthened sufficiently enough for us to see the second half of the season make a real push in the second half of the season. It was classic David Moyes, who consistently talks about he likes working with a stronger squad, with a smaller squad. And that January, anyway, was not the best time to be looking for players, never the right players being available. And he didn't like the January window anyway. Now, the situation could not have pleased either Sullivan or Tim Steidten at the time. And I think that's where the first cracks between Steidten and Sullivan and Steidten and Moyes started to appear. Talk of a new contract started to cool. We started to not do so well in the Premier League. What have we won? 4 games this calendar year. And the second sign was at the Liverpool game. If you recall, throughout the season, we've become accustomed to seeing Tim Steidten standing alongside David Moyes on the touchline before a game, having, quite detailed conversations between the two. Quite in-depth conversations. But at the Liverpool game, Tim Steidten was nowhere to be seen. So clearly, this argument broke out around well before that game had happened. So what exactly has happened? What is the fallout? What is the disagreement all about? Well, David Moyes has apparently confronted Tim Steidten for arranging the meeting between Amorim, the sporting manager, and David Sullivan. He felt that the technical director went behind his back and that he wasn't being genuine enough to be doing this while Moyes was trying to manage the team through our games. But let's get this straight. David Moyes doesn't manage Tim Steidten. Tim Steidten reports directly to David Sullivan. And so therefore David Moyes is kind of barking up the wrong tree in a way. He's really having a go at the wrong man, because if it's Sullivan that has asked Tim Steidten to rightly do due diligence on prospective alternative managers, then David Moyes should be having a go at Sullivan, not at Tim Steidten. Tim Steidten is actually doing his job. He's been asked to go out there and find potential managers that might be available to take the manager's job on at the end of this season. So one thing is for certain, it now proves that West Ham United are definitely looking for alternatives to David Moyes. Now, that's regardless of what the contract situation is, whether it's David Moyes stalling on a new contract, or whether it's David Sullivan now thinking twice about offering David Moyes a new deal. It doesn't matter what that situation is. The reality is that the club are now doing their due diligence to try and find an alternative to David Moyes at the end of this season. Now, we need to know if there is interest from alternative managers. We need to move fast. The last thing we want is for the season to end, David Moyes stalling and stalling and stalling until the actual end of his contract at the end of June, and then a decision made. And then we've got the summer transfer window already open, and we're already way behind other clubs. We need to know what's going to happen when the season ends. Hence the rumors that came out the other day about Sullivan and Moyes not going to have a conversation about his contract until the season ends. So this kind of all now makes sense. We need to make sure that we are ready for whatever happens. And if we feel that there is an alternative manager out there, then we can make a move for that manager straight after the season ends. One thing is for sure, that next season, David Moyes and Tim Steidten both can't be at the club. If they've fallen out, then that's going to damage, morale across the board if both men stay. Now, if you'd have asked me halfway through last season who my money would be on as to who might stay at West Ham between Moyes and Steidten, I wouldn't have known what to answer, to be quite honest with you. But I think now it's far clearer that my money would be on Tim Steidten staying and David Moyes leaving. Now, this also affects what happens with the squad, because there's something like around 8 or 9 players whose West Ham careers, currently lie in the balance for one reason or another. They will either be subject to transfer bids, like Lucas Paqueta and Naif Gerd, for example. Some will be at the end of their contracts and may be stalling until they know who the next manager might be. People like Ben Johnson. And some players may feel that may have been sent out and start again. And some players who have been sent out on loan may feel that perhaps there might be a chance for resurrection at West Ham United if there is a new manager. Players like Ben Rama, Kehrer, and Flynn Downs, for example. And there are some players in the squad who may have deemed that they've not really been given a fair chance under David Moyes, and maybe under a new manager, they might stand a better chance of demonstrating what they're capable of. Maxwell Cornet, Danny Ings, and so on. So will these players believe that they may have a new lease of life under a manager? Quite possibly. Now, of course, any inbound manager may turn around and go, well, actually, I don't want any of you, or I only want to keep some of you. Of course, there'll be that debate. But the one good thing about the potential of maybe some of these players staying on is that we know we need to rebuild the squad yet again. Yet again, we need 7, 8, 9, maybe 10 players to come to West Ham United in order to have a decent squad, not only our first 11, but also in depth on the bench. And any new manager may come in and think, hang on a minute, maybe I don't need to buy as many players. Maybe Maxwell Cornet, if he's played in a different position, might give me what I need. Maybe Danny Ings, given support up front, maybe is the player that I need to bring on when I'm looking to get a goal. Maybe Ben Johnson being played regularly as a right back is the right back we need, rather than having to go out and buy another player. Maybe Kehrer also played maybe as a holding midfielder, or maybe Flynn Downs coming back from Southampton as a backup holding midfielder to Alvarez is the right thing to do. So a new manager will come in and possibly think that maybe there's some quality there that's been untapped or unused in the right way. So not only a big decision about who the manager might be, but what impact there might be on the squad at hand. But there's one thing I think is now fairly certain, is that right now, when I thought maybe that David Moyes might be given a new contract at West Ham United, that feeling has kind of gone.